It was back in BlizzCon 2013, during a panel for Warlords of Draenor, that the question was popped to J. Allen Brack whether Blizzard would consider a relaunch for World of Warcraft, to undo over a decade worth of updates and start us again at square one for the game, to which he of course gave the resounding answer:
no, you think you do, but you don't.
You didn't want to relive the lack of convenience, the time it would take you to level, the questionable class balance. It was all just a memory of a simpler time in the past. Nostalgia, nothing more. Fast forwards to where we are now, Classic has existed for, well, some time. Releasing 26th of August 2019, we went back into Azeroth for the first time in so many years. We saw the frantic launch period, the race to a world first level 60, and to clear Molten Core and Onyxia's lair. We went through the motions all the way to the reopening of the Gates of AQ, the legendary war effort, and the Scarab Lord drama, finally ending on Naxxramas 40-man, a raid tier steeped in mystery due to how few people managed to clear it back in the day. When people advocated for Classic heavily pre-launch, there were certain characteristics that the game really embodied that players wished to bring back and have be part of the game once again. Things that people felt to gradually disappeared from retail over the years, like server community and individual players' reputations, not with any official reputation built into the game, but among their peers. Class and specialization identity, the scale of the world, how massive everything felt, the grind in order to achieve your objectives, ranging from leveling up your abilities to consumables or your epic mount, 40-man raiding, the goals of ranking, and so on. And the pervading community chant at the time was for Blizzard to go about Classic in a way which fit no changes. If they were doing Classic, do Classic, warts and all, the good and the bad. At the time, spellbatching was praised as a win for the community, as was melee leeway. We want ranking just as it was, and for the honor system to release before any battlegrounds were made available. And we got all of that. Oh boy, we sure got all of that. Blizzard's implementation of batching just didn't make sense anymore with modern connection speeds. Ranking was running down Alterac Valley for 12 hours a day, and WoW PvP led minority factions to exodus their servers. Small things though like this never stopped Classic from becoming a huge hit for Blizzard. Throughout the game, it constantly saw a massive amount of interest and was clearly well received overall by the players, though in a much different way and for a much different audience than the original vanilla was. Having a known release schedule to your game, especially in MMO, will do this, I suppose. You can already predict in advance when you need to come back to the game and for what reason. You know what does the most damage or healing or is the best tank. It's all already set in stone and has been perfectly mapped out over decades worth of fan servers and hours of replications of the game. And so as a result, both for Classic and TBC, World of Warcraft has become much more of a patch by patch experience rather than something that's continually growing as it did back from 2004 to 10, just like retail in fact, just like many other MMORPGs these days in fact. Did you always find that you used to have a main game, but these days you're hopping between different titles now, trying things out and just generally looking across the MMO genre or perhaps wider gaming as a whole and seeing the bigger picture? Moving into TBC, the game naturally started to answer some issues that players began to reflect on for Classic that began to pop up again inevitably. The content's too easy. Well, here's heroic dungeons and overall more difficult raiding content. We've nothing to do at endgame, there's no repeatable content. Here's your daily questing hub, Sketis, Ogrilar, Netherwing, the Isle of Quel'Danas, and daily dungeons. PvP ranking was turned into arena with resilience and matchmaking. Leveling takes too long? Well, Classic leveling gets massively sped up, and TBC 60 to 70 is still much shorter than 1 to 60 was in either expansion. Feel as though you're falling behind on gear, you can't catch up? Well, here are your badge vendors, and content gets heavily nerfed as new tiers are introduced. TBC has quote-unquote fixed a lot of concerns, yet if you don't PvP, which the stats we have available tell us the majority of people don't, it somehow feels as though it's even more of a raid log experience than Classic was, at least for me anyways. And it was in Classic and even more so in TBC where players have started to say more and more, I can't wait for the next thing, I'm kind of done with what we have at the moment. Especially in TBC, people saying I can't wait for Wrath of the Lich King, not just for the new class or the new raids or the PvP, but the convenience factors. Many players looked down on Wrath of the Lich King as overall the beginning of the end for World of Warcraft. At the time when it launched originally, some old school vanilla and TBC players called people starting then Wrath babies. These new players had no idea what the game used to be like, when it was hardcore, when you had to work for your epics, when you had to grind for weeks for your epic mount and put all of your own groups together. Wrath of the Lich King was seen to be so much easier. A looking for dungeon that teleports you straight there with no interactions needed. Heirlooms made leveling a breeze and you never even needed to replace them. So many classes had their weak points plugged through being given a defensive cooldown, an offensive cooldown, mobility, and interrupt. Dual spec began to blur the line of who is known for doing what. A lot changed, that much is sure, and in Cataclysm, even more sweeping changes to World of Warcraft would come in, and then they would eventually see a continual drop on a patch-by-patch basis. TBC Classic is still holding out well. I would say the overall player base is large, as shown recently by the drop of Tier 6. There is far more competition from other MMORPGs than there was both during the time of original vanilla or classic, from the likes of Final Fantasy XIV or Lost Ark mainly, at the moment at least. The thing is though, Blizzard were asked to do things no changes, and they have done, well, some things the same way, for the most part anyway, and allowed events to unfold in a rather non-intrusive manner. We've had issues appear, sometimes they're reacted to, like the amount of Black Lotus that dropped midway through Classic, but often it takes them a very long time to do, and we haven't really come to expect things out of the patches which were not originally included at that point in time. Blizzard nearly surprised nerfed Tier 5 content with 1 day's notice, or just recently with the last major content patch, making it so Tier 4 tokens can now be turned into PvP gear. Another good change, which they never really mentioned till patch day, and is not true to the original TBC either. But largely speaking, it's been the same releases, the same kind of servers, the same factions, and, well, wouldn't you know, the same things have happened. Doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome is indeed the definition of madness. The format in which World of Warcraft rolled out its servers has met what you can only assume is its logical conclusion once again at this point. The majority of players choose the biggest servers. If and or when your current server dies, where else would you go but one of them? The massively multiplayer side of World of Warcraft is really important. You want a big player base, active guild, pug groups, good active auction house, PvP arena groups going, and so much else. It's more important than anything else for a considerable number of players. Is anybody going to realistically go from a dead server or one where they are a faction minority and willingly choose to put themselves in the same scenario again? No, of course not. That would be completely crazy. This is just the endgame stage of a two-faction server-based game. It happened in retail and they changed the game because of it. It's now happened in Classic, and we have layering and queues to bridge that gap. What about World of Warcraft as an open world PvP game? It's great. Well, for about the first month or two of a fresh server anyway. It works when people are on a relatively even playing field, when there's no clear bias of how many people are in one zone or the next, when players are frequently coming up against each other, and when flying isn't a thing as well. It was good at the start of Classic, and for Season of Mastery I actually wished I rolled on a PvP server for at least the first month of the game. Fresh PvP is honestly a good experience. In the long term though, it's not. It's just players causing others different levels of inconvenience and then telling them to quit if they don't like it, which they do. The server by server faction PvP war is near always eventually a landslide. And what did the winning faction get as a reward? No more world PvP because the other faction leaves. And where do the players go? Yep, you already know, a mega server where they are now the faction majority. It's certainly Blizzard that's continued making the servers in a way which allows for this to happen, but players en masse keep making the same decisions. Mega server, faction majority, no interest in world PvP, no interest in balanced servers. Maybe people on the servers with 99% of their faction don't want world PvP, they just want other people to play with, and that's where other people are, so that's where they end up going. Again, it's the conclusion of the two-faction server system that World of Warcraft has. This will happen eventually, every single time. So is there a bit more truth all in all to Brack's statement than we may care to admit? Well, you have to expand on it a bit in the first place. When he answers, he doesn't really have much time to talk about it, and he just covers the convenience factors offered from later expansions. But as a view of the whole game, some areas have done much better than others. I think at this point we can say that few players want small servers with name-by-name basis for other players and the smaller communities. You players care about world PvP or a notion of a faction war within the game. Many players care about being on a big server over absolutely everything else. There seems to be much more interest for the raiding content side of the game than the PvP as per data made available. The player base is much more driven by goals, achievements, and loot, and knowing that features to alleviate issues such as respecking, for example, happen for certain in the future is creating present demands for it to happen early. Implementation of certain gameplay elements were kind of scuffed to begin with, such as spell batching, but hey, overall numbers don't lie. Classic was and still is, I think, a huge success for what it is. Unsurprisingly though, many people don't like everything about how the game was, but that's not to say players didn't want it. Not at all. In fact, listen to this.
You think that you want this, and I think maybe that you do.
They just had to do it to them, didn't they? I'm going to be honest, I didn't like every aspect of Classic. I thought the PvP was overall a letdown and that ranking was just an awful system. And I don't find everything in TBC thrilling either. My Shadowbolt key is getting worn off my keyboard after it being my entire rotation for as long as it's been. I'm looking forwards to having an actual rotation and for more things to think about when I'm pressing my buttons in Wrath. I like the collection tabs and places to store my items so they don't mess up my bags or my bank. And you bet I'm looking forwards to the new challenges that raiding will have in store. But that doesn't mean I can't wait for it. I'd much rather have some kind of middle ground between no changes and actually there are a few things that we should probably address. Totally no changes was a little bit much. I liked Classic for what it was, I liked TBC for what it is, and I mean I liked Wrath the Lich King when it was the current expansion, so I guess I'm going to like that. Would I like to see more changes overall? Sure, yeah I would, but other people wouldn't. I think we should leave whatever the current version of the Classic expansion is to be its own thing, a recreation of what it once was. If you do want more and you do want changes, I hope that's where the seasonal servers can do that for you. Though Seasonal Mastery went in a little bit on the shallow end for me personally, I'm hoping for a bigger and better season 2. As for not wanting all of this though, look, Classic is old by MMOs, real old, 16 years now is it? And somehow I still find it more enjoyable than most games that have come out over the past few years. There are some things in the simplicity of it all, like how smooth and responsive the combat is. If the biggest single and most successful update Blizzard have done in recent years is to remove every update they have ever done, I think that certainly tells you something about how many people really did want the original game. That is all from me though. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.